Eric knew how to talk Jim down, as when Jim wouldn't listen to anybody else, and there weren't many people Jim would listen to, call Eric.
What really happened behind the scenes between two of rock's most iconic frontmen? Eric Burdon and Jim Morrison shared more than a turbulent era. They shared chaos, confrontation, and a world on the edge of transformation. Few people know how their paths crossed in the glare of fame, and even fewer could have foreseen the volatile moments that followed. From backstage alliances to simmering rivalries, their intertwined stories reveal a rarely seen side of the 1960s music scene, exposing secrets, shattered ambitions, and the fragile line between brilliance and self-destruction. The hidden rift emerges. Eric Burdon and Jim Morrison first crossed paths amid the excitement of the San Francisco music scene, a place buzzing with creative energy and larger-than-life personalities. At that time, both men were riding waves of success, but heading in very different directions. Burdon, fresh from the international breakthrough of the Animals, was trying to regain his footing after a series of setbacks. Morrison, meanwhile, was ascending rapidly with The Doors, captivating audiences with his magnetic stage presence and poetic darkness. Their relationship began with genuine camaraderie, sharing stories about music and film backstage, creating a bond that felt promising and inspiring. Yet beneath the surface of their friendship, subtle clashes started to emerge. Jim's chaotic lifestyle contrasted sharply with Eric's more disciplined efforts to rebuild his career. Morrison's unraveling habits made him unpredictable and volatile, often disrupting efforts around him. Burdon, burdened by financial woes and the pressure to remain relevant, found himself increasingly on edge. The friendship that had started with shared enthusiasm began showing cracks, as both men grappled with their personal demons. Tensions simmered quietly, setting the stage for a more dramatic showdown that lingered in the background. Eric vividly recalls the cool invitation from Morrison to move to Southern California, a place Jim promised was bursting with opportunity and artistic freedom. Taking this advice would change Burdon's trajectory, but it also thrust him deeper into the world where Morrison's contradictions grew stronger. As they moved into the same circles, spanning musicians like Frank Zappa and Janis Joplin, Burdon's observations of Morrison became conflicted. He admired Morrison's charisma and brilliance, but also saw a man spiraling out of control. The cohabitation of their worlds seemed both a brotherhood and a powder keg. This dynamic was a microcosm of a larger scene balancing on the brink of chaos. What made the rift particularly striking was how both men represented different visions of rock stardom. Burdon's blues roots and evolving psychedelic style contrasted against Morrison's enigmatic and self-destructive image. The push and pull between their creative spirits and personal struggles created an unspoken tension. Burdon's frustrations grew when Morrison began antagonizing those around him, including Burdon himself. As strange as it seems, the seeds of conflict sprouted quietly at first, hidden beneath the era's glitz and glamour. Yet everyone involved knew something was unsettled, if not yet fully understood. This underlying friction carries weight because it wasn't just personal. It mirrored the broader collapse of the 1960s idealism. As the counterculture began to fade, these two figures embodied the clash between hope and disillusionment. The friendship and rivalry offered a glimpse into what would become inevitable for them both. But the story that burst forth later contained revelations few ever expected. Burdon's account, given only after Morrison's death, paints a raw and unvarnished picture of those turbulent days. The most explosive chapters were yet to come, and they would alter legacies forever. As the stage was set for their fateful collision, the wounds left by financial betrayal and lost dreams would fuel Eric's anger and shape his outlook on Morrison and the music world itself. The Animals' royalty betrayal. The trials Eric Burdon faced after the Animals' meteoric rise were staggering and closely entwined with betrayal and shattered trust. Their breakthrough hit, House of the Rising Sun, was recorded in a mere 10 minutes and cost less than $10, yet propelled the band to a #1 spot that ousted the Beatles in 1964. This unprecedented success should have secured their future, but what followed was far from stable. The label for the single couldn't fit all the band members' names, leading their manager, Mike Jeffrey, to propose putting the only Alan Price's name on it. A decision that seemed minor at the time, but had devastating consequences. Ultimately, Price became the sole royalty recipient, while the rest of the Animals were left empty-handed. Eric describes the signing away of rights as the most pivotal, disastrous moment of his life. Their manager promised to settle the legalities later, but vanished with the money, leaving the band penniless. The money from what should have been a financial windfall was instead lost or stolen, and with relentless touring behind them, the financial strain deepened. This betrayal would haunt Burdon and underscore the precariousness of success in the music industry. Beyond the lost royalties, the Animals fell victim to schemes like creative accounting, orchestrated by their manager to hide earnings in Bahamas accounts supposedly to avoid taxes. But when Eric and the band tried to retrieve their rightful money, they found the banks and millions of dollars had vanished. Their manager fled to Spain. The bank they sought no longer existed, and their dreams were shattered. Burdon recalls the embarrassment and helplessness at being unable to fight back legally, as they couldn't afford a lawyer. They felt stranded, with no hope of restoring what had been taken. Burdon, unable to withstand the sting of his financial troubles, retreated from Newcastle, his hometown, because it was inconceivable to him to go back empty-handed. Coming to California, he was looking for a new life, and there was the music scene that was just offshore and waiting for him to catch the new wave. He was not only changing location, but also getting an opportunity to start all over again his life and his career. Signing a new contract with MGM and putting together a new band, Eric Burdon and the New Animals, was like a new birth full of hope. But the problems of the past were still there, and they were very much in the way. Burdon's artistic ability, together with his sheer willpower, kept him going despite the problems. His shows at places such as the Troubadour and Fillmore West still attracted large audiences who were rather electrified. And this was a clear sign of Burdon's creative side being still alive and kicking. Nevertheless, the financial frauds of the past had taken their toll on the artist's emotional state, and thus he became very skeptical and suspicious. He tried to cope by leaning on his friendship with Jim Morrison, a guy he befriended at a San Francisco concert. Morrison's skyrocketing career and Burdon's crusade for self-reinvention slowly turned into a complicated relationship filled with power plays that would mark their association. The loss of the Animals' earnings was not merely a financial matter. It showed the harshness of the music industry that left the artists unprotected. Burdon's journey emphasized the susceptibility of even the most successful artists to abuse and deception. This past also molded his future with Morrison, whose own battles with vices and even destructive behaviors were the complete opposite of Burdon's hard-earned trust. The sorrow from being betrayed turned Burdon into a person who was both careful and eager. His story is like a warning that no matter how gifted a person is, there is always a danger of getting caught up in the dark side of music's glamour. In the south of the USA, the financial disaster led Burdon to the same route as the psychedelic music and the experimental artists, which were the main characteristics of the changing culture. The road to recovery was long, but it led him to new creative paths. His eventual fights and discoveries regarding Morrison are a part of this story of loss and growth. The money betrayals served as a catalyst, taking away dreamlike views and compelling him to deal with very tough truths. However, this hardship opened the door to his career, which was marked by both the revival of his talent and bitterness. The environment of the time was ripe for their next chapter to unfold amid the extreme highs and lows of the music scene in the 60s. The unfolding story would reveal this intricate emotional terrain, where old wounds met new conflicts, culminating in a confrontation that shocked everyone involved: psychedelia, creativity, and collapse. California, in the late 1960s, was a fertile ground for reinvention, and Eric Burdon embraced it wholeheartedly. Taking Jim Morrison's advice to settle in Southern California, Burdon stepped into Laurel Canyon, a neighborhood that buzzed with creativity and eccentricity. His neighbors included legends like Joni Mitchell, Frank Zappa, Cass Elliot, and Canned Heat, artists pushing musical boundaries and lifestyles. This vibrant enclave provided Burdon the environment to grow and experiment musically, moving away from his blues roots to embrace psychedelic odysseys, reflecting the changing times and his evolving mindset. During this period, Eric recorded two tracks with Frank Zappa, All Night Long, and The Other Side of Life, collaborations that highlighted his willingness to push creative limits. Zappa, a cultural maverick, inspired and challenged Burdon, broadening his artistic vision. The communal nature of Laurel Canyon facilitated unexpected encounters, such as a night when Janis Joplin invited Burdon backstage, introducing him to a powerful new experience with a potent psychedelic tab. Such moments reveal how deeply the scene immersed him in both the musical and experimental zeitgeist. These experiences fueled his evolving sound and creative ambitions. Life in California wasn't all bright lights and studio time, however. Burdon found himself riding motorcycles down Mulholland Drive, captivated by the scenic beauty and a sense of freedom rarely found elsewhere. Yet, beneath the picturesque exterior, the darker realities of substance culture and social upheaval loomed. The idealism of the early 1960s counterculture was beginning to fray as substances shifted and violence crept into communities like Laurel Canyon. Eric's music reflected this tension, blending psychedelic exploration with a haunting awareness of change. This duality permeated his creative output during this transformative phase. Amid this evolving backdrop, Burdon's band adapted too. The transition from the Animals to Eric Burdon and the New Animals marked not just a change in name, but a shift in sound and purpose. Songs like San Francisco Nights, inspired by a memorable night watching Janis Joplin perform at the Fillmore, captured the spirit of the time, the raw passion, the excitement, and the fleeting nature of the moment. The track climbed into the top 10, signaling a hopeful resurgence in Burdon's career. Yet, the surface success masked the growing undercurrents of instability within both the community and Burdon himself. Burdon's increasing interactions with Jim Morrison during this time showed a complex friendship rooted in mutual respect, but increasingly strained by Morrison's erratic behavior. At first, Morrison appeared as a charismatic figure, optimistic and looking destined for greater fame. But as months passed, Burdon perceived Morrison's inability to maintain discipline or focus, especially with Morrison's ambitions in film that never materialized. The friend he once admired seemed caught in a downward spiral that only deepened with time. Their shared artistic dreams began to unravel amid personal struggles. The music scene around Laurel Canyon was a melting pot of innovation and chaos. Burdon's involvement brought renewed creative energy, but also exposed him to internal battles in the industry and within himself. The community included legends and outsiders alike, all caught up in the changing social currents. In this environment, Burdon's collaborations and inspirations fed his growth, while Morrison's declining reliability became a source of concern. This delicate balance defined their parallel journeys before conflict finally ignited. Burdon's embrace of California's cultural movement was both a new beginning and a testing ground. His music matured, incorporating influences from blues, psychedelia, and the mysticism of the times. Meanwhile, Morrison embodied the dark side of the same movement, artistic genius shadowed by self-destructive tendencies. Their coexistence in this landscape underscored how far their paths were diverging. Burdon's artistic evolution during this period laid the foundation for what was to come, a blend of hope that coexisted uneasily with growing turmoil. The signs of strain in their worlds could not be ignored, as personal choices and external pressures pushed them toward an inevitable clash. Laurel Canyon's dark turn. By the late 1960s, Laurel Canyon was more than just a picturesque neighborhood. It was the beating heart of the Los Angeles music scene, home to some of the era's most influential artists. Eric Burdon, having settled there on Jim Morrison's advice, found himself part of a vibrant community mixed with creative magic and casual excess. The air was thick with experimentation, both musical and chemical, as musicians sought to push boundaries and redefine culture. But beneath this artistic flowering, darker changes were quietly unfolding, shifting the spirit of the place. The idealistic glow that had made Laurel Canyon a haven was dimming rapidly in 1969. News of brutal slayings, including the infamous slayings at a nearby residence, shattered the community's sense of safety. Eric recalls the day he heard about the attack on Sharon Tate, a wake-up call that many saw as the symbolic end of the hippie era. Fear gripped the local scene, and the once open and trusting atmosphere began to close in. Doors were locked, and the carefree days of wide-open gatherings were replaced by suspicion and dread. The substance culture turned from the ecstatic highs and communal experiences to the more dangerous ones. The use of marijuana and LSD was gradually replaced by the use of harder substances, and the hopes for a spiritual awakening started to erode into darker cycles of dependency and despair. Eric himself was a witness to this decline, saying how the super energy that he once rode had turned into isolation and befuddlement. What at first seemed to be a trap turned out to be the real thing as the borders got poorer and the power went away. The community reacted to the increasing threat in a revealing manner. Gun sales went up as musicians, along with the residents, were already paranoid, and a desperate need for protection was a reason for armed men. Eric recalls that in 1 week, the sales of shotguns became very high, each weapon symbolizing the passing of innocence among the inhabitants of their artistic sanctuary. This change in attitude was a reflection of how violence and fear have taken over a place that was supposed to be the epitome of peace and creativity. The very core of Laurel Canyon was coming apart, and the people living there were having a hard time finding their way out of the change. During this period of time, Eric was also dealing with his own inner conflict. The thrill of earlier achievements was replaced by thoughts about his future, and the music business, along with personal disputes, took a toll on him. Becoming more and more secluded and defenseless, he finally disbanded his recently formed band, Eric Burdon and the New Animals. This withdrawal meant a low point in his career and in his feelings. The very scene that had been hinting at renewal was now a place of loss, where dreams were as if they were shimmering, just to vanish. Fear and uncertainty created an atmosphere that affected not only people's personal lives, but also the creative process. The music of Burdon started to show the tension, and the direction shifted from pure psychedelia to a dark and more conflicted tone. The realities of the world that were becoming more dangerous and unpredictable did not completely extinguish the optimism of the earlier years. This change reflected the broader cultural shift that affected many artists who used to consider themselves part of a revolution. The dream was fading, and the nightmare was taking over. Laurel Canyon, composer of a former time of tranquility and artistic freedom, had become a place where paranoia and disillusionment were raging. The locality for Eric was such that it confused the boundaries of friend and enemy, sanity and madness, hope and despair. The beginning of a very promising new chapter had now been overshadowed by inner and outer tension, which would subsequently lead to conflicts of an intense nature. The dream that was once idyllic was now fractured, replaced by shadows that were casting long and threatening shapes over the lives that were inside. The moment was ripe for confrontation, charged by the undercurrents of fear and betrayal saturating the air around them. The War Mansion tensions. Eric Burdon's collaboration with a band originally known as Night Shift marked a hopeful comeback, with new momentum fueled by label support and creative collaboration. They soon moved into a large mansion in the San Fernando Valley, which quickly gained a reputation as the War Mansion, after the band was renamed War. It became a magnet for the Los Angeles music scene's most colorful and troubled figures. Parties were frequent, and the mansion was alive with energy, often blurring the line between celebration and chaos. Among the regular guests was Jim Morrison, whose presence brought an unpredictable edge to the household. Morrison, by this point, was a shadow of his former self. Once the magnetic frontman of The Doors, he was now often found passed out in hallways with a group of companions, his behavior erratic and fueled by alcohol. His charm had given way to volatility, and his personal demons increasingly impacted those around him. Eric describes Morrison as a glutton for punishment, someone whose sensitive and brilliant nature was too often overwhelmed by destructive impulses. The mansion became a crucible where Morrison's instability affected everyone living there. One particularly telling incident involved a white grand piano in the house. Lonnie Jordan, a band member known for his playful entrances, would pound on the piano to announce his arrival. This seemingly innocent act infuriated Morrison one day. Bursting into the house, Jim confronted Lonnie aggressively, demanding to know what he was doing. When Lonnie tried to play it off casually, Morrison berated him relentlessly, provoking a physical response. Lonnie punched Morrison in the face, but did not deter his confrontational spirit. This clash was emblematic of the mounting unrest within the mansion itself. Tensions soon shifted directly onto Eric Burdon. Morrison began targeting him with verbal harassment, sparking a back and forth that soon left Burdon simmering with anger. Their exchanges were fueled by growing frustration on both sides. Morrison's unraveling made him unpredictable and hostile, while Burdon felt the pressure of commercial expectations and personal struggles. Though Burdon tried to contain his temper, the provocations piled up, escalating the volatile atmosphere. The mansion's charged environment became a pressure cooker for conflict. The War Mansion, meanwhile, had slid further from a creative retreat into a site of excess and disorder. Morrison's growing entourage often took over the shared spaces, leaving the house strewn with passed-out guests and a palpable sense of decadence. One morning, Eric awoke to find the mansion overrun with Morrison and his companions, sprawled across floors and corridors. Trying to navigate past them to reach his office, Burdon's patience finally snapped. The disrespect boiled over, igniting a rage that had been building for some time. Seizing a .44 Magnum, a powerful handgun, Burdon confronted the situation head-on. He moved deliberately through the marble-floored mansion, stepping over unconscious figures as he approached Morrison. The gun had one bullet in the chamber, a chilling symbol of the intensity and danger simmering beneath the surface. Morrison, half awake and slumped against a wall, casually dismissed the threat, joking to his companions that Burdon wasn't serious. But what followed was a startling expression of Burdon's pent-up fury. The intensity of their final interaction revealed more than personal conflicts. It illuminated the tragic dimensions of a generation caught between dreams and destruction. The confrontation with Jim Morrison. Tensions between Eric Burdon and Jim Morrison had been simmering for some time, fueled by clashing egos, mounting pressures, and personal demons. One morning in the sprawling war mansion, the fragile peace was shattered completely. Burdon woke to find Morrison and his entourage passed out across the floors and corridors, completely taking over the shared space. The disrespect hit Burdon hard. Navigating past the unconscious bodies to reach his office, his frustration boiled over into anger. Grabbing a .44 Magnum from another room, Burdon's simmering rage found a powerful outlet. He stalked across the polished marble floor, stepping over figures too intoxicated or exhausted to move. Morrison, half awake and slumped against a wall, opened his eyes to see Burdon holding the gun. Rather than reacting with fear, Morrison joked to the women nearby that Burdon was only joking. The moment balanced on edge, dangerous yet drenched in a strange theatricality. With mounting drama, Burdon trained the gun on an ornate chandelier and shot up. The barrel turning sent the muzzled shot rattling the crystals all around them in a tempest of glass pieces. The loudest sound of falling crystals filled the whole mansion and petrified all the occupants, even Burdon. It was a very strong mark of the negative feelings and anguish that had lasted months or even years. The thunder of sound and the shards being scattered took on the meaning of the things that had gone wrong between the people involved. Morrison's response could be described as dreamlike or unreal. He showed the women around him his teeth and, by a gesture, indicated that such uproar was something very normal, thus implying that he considered it part of the game. Burdon manipulated the trigger once more, with each shot being an utterance of a strong kind. Nonetheless, it was the last shot that came with the hammer being pulled back, done in pure wrath, that determined the peak. The glass falling down was not mere waste. It was the ending of a friendship, the breaking of trust, and the squandering of goodwill between two legendary personalities. The incident revealed more than just a personal dispute. It underlined the heavy toll of addiction, celebrity, and broken ties. They were both very different, yet somehow similar, involved in a turmoil that it was hard for anybody outside their inner circle to perceive. Thus, their lives had a mutual cause of destruction. The broken chandelier became a symbol of the disintegration of their lives and careers around them. For Burdon, it was a turning point, the moment when long-suppressed rage suddenly became the reality no one could deny. The shooting through the chandelier caused a scare among the residents of the house, but did not physically injure anyone. However, the confrontation's mental effect was profound and lasting. It symbolized the point of no return in the relationship between Burdon and Morrison. Trust and respect were wiped out in the midst of the turmoil, giving way to suspicion and coldness. The mansion, which had been a place full of potential, was now a battlefield where the ties were severed and the future was darkened. As Morrison's downward spiral accelerated, Burdon faced the challenge of rebuilding amidst loss and disillusionment. Their intertwined fates diverged sharply, marking the end of an era and the opening of new chapters. Aftermath, and Morrison's fall. Following the intense confrontation in the War Mansion, Jim Morrison's life took a sharp downward turn. He soon moved to Paris, escaping the pressures and turmoil that had engulfed him in Los Angeles. This move was not just geographical, but symbolic, a retreat from the world where his demons had gained too much ground. Months later, the music world was rocked by the news of his death. Found lifeless in a bathtub at age 27, cementing his tragedy and myth, Morrison's legacy remains complex, marked by a dazzling brilliance that defined an era, but also by the costs of his excesses. He was a singular talent whose intensity captivated audiences and inspired generations, yet his personal struggles kept him from the discipline needed to sustain his promises. Burdon's observation of Morrison as a glutton for punishment hinted at the self-imposed torment that hastened his fall. Morrison's death was a final, haunting punctuation to a life lived on the edge. For Eric Burdon, Morrison's passing marked both an end and the beginning of a new phase. Whereas Morrison's story concluded in Paris, Burdon found himself on the verge of reinvention. Despite years of setbacks and broken trusts, new opportunities appeared unexpectedly. Alongside key industry figures like Jerry Goldstein and Steve Gold, Burdon was offered a path toward revitalization, a chance to reclaim his voice and reconnect with audiences. Burdon's next project, formed with core members of a San Fernando Valley band called Night Shift, was renamed simply War. It represented a fresh start at a time when his career seemed precarious. The band began rehearsing for their first tour with renewed energy, hoping to capture the spirit of reinvention. War would become the vehicle through which Burdon re-established his presence on the music scene. This resurgence was heralded by the single Spill the Wine, a track born from an almost accidental moment in the studio. A bottle of wine tipped over during a jam session. The song's laid-back groove and catchy refrain struck a chord with listeners, reaching the top 10 charts and marking Burdon's most significant success in years. It was seen as a triumphant comeback, a quiet revenge against the betrayals and setbacks that had defined his earlier career. Their histories, forever linked, continue to fascinate as cautionary tales and celebrations of artistry. Eric's resurgence and reflection. After years of conflict, loss, and disillusionment, Eric Burdon found renewed purpose through his band War. This chapter was more than a comeback. It was a reinvention. The album Eric Burdon Declares War arrived when his career seemed uncertain, yet it delivered fresh energy and direction. Its lead single, Spill the Wine, climbed into the top 10, blending funk, rock, and psychedelia into a sound that felt both contemporary and liberated. The song's accidental origin, sparked by a spilled bottle during a jam session, became symbolic of Burdon reclaiming creative control and personal dignity after years of betrayal. Burdon stated that his experience was surreal and empowering, almost like entering a new life after surviving the edge. The victory confirmed that one could be reborn even after going through severe professional and emotional crises. However, Morrison's presence was still felt. Burdon's musing paid tribute to Morrison's genius, along with his catastrophic personal ventures, presenting a realistic view opposite to the legend. Their linked stories were a research in opposition. They were so different. One ended with a tragedy, while the other started a new life. Burdon's collaboration with War was a definite step forward from his past, defined by blues. The band's varied sound and socially aware issues enriched his artistic identity, showing him as a person not only from the 1960s, but also as an artist still capable of maturation. Through interviews and the memoir Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood, Burdon's honest memories pruned the glorified tales down to the real human suffering behind the fame. His journey is, eventually, a non-conventional tale of resilience, the capacity to turn loss into energy, and to live through a tumultuous time with truth and creative purpose not at all surrendered. Eric Burdon's journey reveals the hidden struggles behind rock legends, reminding us that greatness often comes with sacrifice. His story, intertwined with Jim Morrison's, teaches resilience amid chaos and the power of reinvention. If you found this deep dive enlightening, please like the video and subscribe for more untold rock histories and candid stories. Thanks for watching.